Twitter, I had a request, please say something nice about millennials. And my response was, in the 1970s, they didn't exist. I think that millennials can be educated, but it's an uphill battle. I think that millennials have grown up in a system that tells them that they are each, again, individual precious snowflakes with unearned superiority and self-esteem, and it's very hard to take that away from people, because if that's all that you base your virtue on, how you feel about yourself as a person, that's hard. And so I spend my career making people feel bad about themselves, right? And it actually is, it's a life goal, and so far I'm great at it. But the reason for that is because I believe in earned self-esteem. Do something good for other people, help out your community, produce products and services that other people want to trade you for. Now you have earned that self-esteem. I think that the millennials are going to try and craft a world where they don't. This is why they buy into Bernie Sanders, because Bernie Sanders says stupid things. I mean, he's just, I don't even know. Does he know what century he's in? He says stupid things. Like yesterday, he tweets it. He creates a fantasy world for himself, fueled by unicorn crap. And yesterday, all of his tweets looked something like the tweet he had yesterday, which was, the banks should not look for profit. The banks should provide loans at very low rates. Right? That's really their goal. And so the entire millennial generation is buying into this because, yeah, wouldn't that be awesome if the banks were just giving away free loans? No, you idiots. They were called subprime loans and they crashed the economy. When you grow up, the richest people that God ever created, okay, in the richest society that God ever created, and that mankind ever created, when you grow up in that society and you live off the fat of the land, teenagers want to rebel, young people want to change the world. What if the world's pretty good? What if the United States is a pretty good place? Will they mellow out? I would have said that they would mellow out when they get married and have kids, except they're not getting married and they're not having kids. Right? Getting married and having kids does mellow you out a little bit. You should have seen me before. So I am by nature a pessimist, which is convenient for me because it means that I'm always right eventually. Right? but I think that I do think that most people have never been confronted with ideas with which they disagree, which is why I think it's important to have discussions like this one. I think that there is hope, but it's going to take all of us anybody who believes in these freedoms, you're going to have to walk toward the fire, and you're going to have to wrest away that unearned moral superiority from people. Because that's what they rely on. They don't have to rely on knowing anything or doing good things. They know they're better than you as a human. And when you take that away from them, then they actually have to start rethinking, okay, well, what would make me better? What do I do that's so great?
One of the things that you mentioned in your speech was that sooner or later they're going to have to come out of college and live with the reality of life and making a living and doing these types of things. There's enough kids in the millennial that have now come out of the colleges. How are they faring? What are they doing?
I mean, they're faring poorly. They're shocked. I mean, they're kids who are now suing their colleges. This is an actual lawsuit. Suing their colleges because they're saying, I was promised a job, I was promised an income after I come out of here. Right? The Occupy Wall Street movement was all disenchanted college kids who got out after that lesbian dance theory major and thought they were going to make 6 figures somewhere. And it turns out nobody pays to watch people theorize about lesbian dance. So, so they end up, going and living in tents in Central Park and pooping on themselves. Life is a rough teacher. What the left has tried to do is extend kind of the period of adolescence indefinitely, right? So now you're 26 and you're on your parents' health care. Okay, by age 26, I'd been married for a couple of years, and I was 2 years away from having a kid, and I already had 2 degrees and 4 published books. And by the way, that's actually, I'm not even a success story if you go back 50 years, right? 50 years by the age of 26. You were supposed to be fully ensconced in your job. You're supposed to have like 3 kids by that point. What we've done is prolonged adolescence indefinitely. And so what Obama's goal is, what the left's goal is, what Bernie Sanders, Hillary, they have the same goal. And the same goal is to extend college out. Right? College is not a place that's kind of a break from reality. College is the new reality. So we have to make all of human life like college. And this is what they think Europe is, which is why Europe is Europe is going to collapse. And it's being invaded by foreign forces, and the barbarians are at the gates. And Europe is going to fall apart, and it is falling apart. So we can play this game, but it's not going to end well. And the problem is that because the education is so poor, instead of reacting against their teachers at college who told them everything was going to be hunky-dory, instead of having the kind of all quiet on the Western Front moment, you know, where the former student goes back to his classroom after World War I, he's in the middle of World War I, he goes back and he yells at his professor and he says, "You're telling all these kids the wrong thing. You're telling them that war's awesome." Instead of them going back and yelling at their professors, they say, "No, it just shows my professor was right because society is unjust." Right? The lack of my $100,000 salary, that's because society is mean, and so we have to transform the society. And that's why young people, again, 40% back speech codes in American life. This is why I think the last poll was nearing or over 40% of young people are okay with socialism, like the actual socialism, because they don't know anything. They've been taught stupidity, and how they feel is all that matters. I mean, there's a video that's going around the internet getting all sorts of play about income inequality. Income inequality is the stupidest issue. Income inequality means nothing. Right? I mean, I have a lot of income inequality with Bill Gates, but I'm doing pretty well, and I don't care that Bill Gates is doing really well. The only thing we should all care about is that there are poor people. We should figure out how poor people can do better, not how to make Bill Gates less rich. But this video is going around and saying, here's a poll of what Americans think the wealth distribution should look like, and here is what the wealth distribution actually looks like. And I watched this video in bewilderment, and young people love it. And I watched this video in bewilderment saying, who told you that you get to tell the universe how wealth is distributed? Right? Who told you that you have a moral say as to how wealth is distributed? It's immoral, it's evil, it's wrong. You're going to have to steal people's labor from them. But people are not told this, and so they think that their own subjective vision of what reality should look like should govern what reality actually looks like, and it's only later, after 80 years of communist failure, that they realize, oh, and hundreds of millions of people dead, that they realize, oh, that was a bad idea. For like 10 years, and then they go right back to it.
Could you please explain the unholy alliance between the left and the forces and the Muslim supremacists, considering that the premises and the principles of both of them are mutually incompatible?
Okay, so they're not mutually incompatible to point A, they are to point B. What I mean is that it's a timeline. The left wants to tear down Western civilization because it thinks it's unequal. The radical Muslims want to tear down Western civilization because they think it's evil. So to the point of tearing down Western civilization, they're pretty much on the same page. It's where they go from there that's a problem. Right? One side wants to build a caliphate and the other side wants to build a communist utopia. The reason that the left is routinely, and it's almost invariable, that the left ends up siding with the world's worst human beings in every situation is because, again, if you just go back to that fundamental leftist principle that equality of outcome is all that matters in life, that equality of outcome means that something just is happening, think about it. The real world is a place where God designed it this way. I believe this. God designed it not for every individual, but certainly for the vast bulk of humanity. If you do responsible, good things with your life, you will be more successful than if you do irresponsible, bad things with your life. Well, if the left believes that people who are unsuccessful are more virtuous, then what that means is that the non-virtuous are more virtuous, right? Because the people who are unsuccessful are generally not doing good, responsible things, and the left says, well, those people are victims, let's help them. Right? So the Muslims in the Middle East are victims of Israel. They must be victims of Israel because Israel's rich, and its neighbors are not. So they must be victims. Well, the real reason that the Muslims, the Palestinian Muslims, for example, are poor is because they've spent all the money that has been given to them, hundreds of billions of dollars, all the money that's been given to them over the course of decades, and they've spent it on terrorism, and they've spent it on stocking it away in their bank accounts of Yasser Arafat and Mahmoud Abbas, and they've spent it on garbage, and they spent it on anti-Israel propaganda. That's the real reason they're poor. But the left looks at it and they say, they're poor. That means they're virtuous. This is why I hate it, really despise it, when Republicans do the whole, I'm a better person because I have a rags to riches story. You weren't a better person when you're poor. Okay, no one is a better person just because they're poor. By the way, no one's a better person because they're rich. All that wealth is a measure of how many voluntary exchanges you engaged in a free market. That's all that wealth is. But the idea for the left is that all inequality is evil. Therefore, the people who are unequal at the top are evil and the people at the bottom are virtuous. Which is why you'll hear people on the left say things like they like small business, but they hate people who are big business, like the Walmart family, right? The Walton family. They're terrible. Well, were they terrible when they were just a family living in the middle of nowhere? When exactly did they transition over into evil? Right? When they became successful enough, because their success meant, by necessity, according to the leftist worldview, they were depriving others of their fair share. And Bernie Sanders said this right after winning New Hampshire the other night. And this is Bernie Sanders' entire thing. He says the principle of America is the principle of fairness, which makes me want to vomit and never stop vomiting. The principle of America is not fairness of outcome. And he was talking about fairness of outcome. He said, oh, it's unfair that 1% of the population lives with more wealth than 90% of the rest of the population. And well, maybe, or maybe it's not unfair, because it turns out that 1% of the population is hiring the other 90% of the population to actually provide their services and labor.
We have time for one more question.
Hi, Mr. Shapiro. I'm a community college teacher, and so I pay union dues to the CTA and the NEA, and as you can imagine, I'm not real happy about that.
Don't let them get a hold of this tape. You're going to blur out his face. And
no, I'm worried. Do you have any hope? I believe the Supreme Court recently heard oral arguments, Friedrichs versus CTA.
Mm-hmm.
Any hope that that might come out?
Yeah. I mean, there is hope that that might come out the right way. It really depends on, you know, whether Justice Kennedy had a solid bowel movement in the morning. I mean, basically, I mean, all Supreme Court arguments basically boil down to this vital question of whether he took his Metamucil. Justice Kennedy theoretically has an overriding philosophy of what he thinks of as individual liberty. So anything that allows you to do more stuff on your own is something we should allow. So he was in favor of gay marriage because it allows gay people to get married. He's in favor. He's against, you know, campaign finance reform because he thinks people should be allowed to spend money on politics. So presumably, theoretically, he could vote the right way.